Flip. Okay, so Alex and Dallin, you guys weren't here last time I taught, which is fine and great. But I'll introduce myself a little bit. I'm Cody Fehlberg. I own a team called Wow House, which has shrunk because, as these guys heard from me last time, a lot of people don't want to do what they're coached to do, or they try to do it and aren't capable of being successful with it. And the results of both of those are the same thing, which is not being successful and getting someone else to spend a lot of time when it doesn't result in anything. And that's not my gig. So I have been in real estate for, it'll be 6 years in May. So not super long. Do either of you have like a background in sales at all? Will, did you go to the state tournament? You did? I was there last night.
I didn't go last night. I went the night before.
Watch, there's a kid that I lost to in high school that I ended up smoking him at the state tournament. I watched his son get whooped in the finals. And it shouldn't have, but it felt really good. See you, dude. Yeah.
And he was making the same kind of comments like, man, that guy beat me. That's his kid.
Yep.
Feel bad. He lost, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Good. See ya. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, real estate is fun. Do you guys have a background in sales at all? Okay. 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 So we talked a little, did I bring up like your experience going into a bank? We did this, right? Talking about like how tellers talk to people. Did we talk about this? Maybe we didn't. Okay, so this is a sales job, you guys, right? The cool thing about real estate though is the only person I don't have to sell something to is my client, right? I don't care what they buy, right? I'm ready to help them find something that fits, and then when they tell me what fits, then I use my sales skills to go and help them get it at terms that work for them, okay? So real estate's a really funky sales industry because I'm not selling things to my client beyond just me, right? I'm selling myself as the one that should be helping them, okay? But if you are looking, and we were just talking about this earlier, right? We were talking about like showing homes. A lot of buyer's agents, when they're like in a home with their client, all they're doing is like pointing out all the great things and, oh, this would be perfect for this and this. But like, that's not your job, right? Your job isn't to sell them on this house. Your job is to help them figure out if this house is a good fit, right? You're there to point things out that maybe are negatives that they aren't seeing too, because our job is to protect them, right? Buyer, seller, my job is to get my clients more of what they want and give away less to get it. Okay, right? That's my job as an agent. And it's cool because I get to use my sales skills with an agent on the other side. I don't use my sales skills with my own client once they are my client, right? I'm using my sales skills to make people decide they want to hire me. And that's tricky when you're starting off. And I talked about this a little bit last time. Like, this is how I dress with my clients. Okay, I didn't do that early on, right? Like you kind of like grow to be able to do things the way that you would choose to do them. So I'll tell you, for like the longest time, for the first few years, I made sure that the way I dressed, the way that I spoke, really was going to be as well received by the largest group of people as possible, right? I wanted to be somebody that was alienating to nobody and was welcoming to everybody, even when sometimes, like I've had clients that are just straight up dicks, right? I don't want to work with those people anymore. There was a time I needed their business, so I would like placate them a little bit, like, oh yeah, like I would entertain some of the things that they would say, and now I don't have to do that anymore, right? But when you're starting and building, there's some of that you like, unfortunately, like got to go along with until you can build your pipeline, right? So I will tell you, like, before we kind of dive into like the negotiation part of what makes me good at this and what I would have worked to adapt for all of you, you want to be a chameleon as much as possible. Okay. Now I've sat in rooms of 40 agents teaching negotiation at my last brokerage, and I've had experienced agents who aren't as busy as they want to be say things like, well, but isn't that like, that's just being fake. And I'm not going to be fake. I'm like, great. You be authentic and I'll get the business. Okay. And it's not that I'm not being authentic. It's that I'm just going to interact with you in a way that speaks to you, that connects with you. Right. And I still do this. You want to be a chameleon. If they are very to the point, analytical, okay, then be analytical. Be to the point. When you call, they don't need the fluff. They don't need the pleasantries. Get right down to what we're calling for. I've got other clients, it's all about the relationship. They just are very emotional. And okay, great, now I can be that too. So that's what, especially as all of you are starting all of this, I would work really hard at identifying quickly, not just with your clients or potential clients, customers, whatever it may be, but with agents as well. Identify quickly who are they, how do they want to communicate, so I can communicate in a way that connects with them and they will enjoy this interaction. Okay? And it's not super easy. It takes practice. It takes years of practice. But you will get better and better and better at it. And again, if other people want to be more quote unquote authentic, and I don't think that's not me being authentic, right? Adjusting the way that I communicate to speak to you is not me being fake. It's just me. It's like speaking in a different language, right? If you only speak Spanish and I only speak English, oh, am I being fake by speaking Spanish to you? No, of course not. And it literally is no different. I'm speaking the language that they will understand, okay? So that's what, early on, work hard to identify that, especially with agents on the other side. And we'll talk through why that is, okay? All right. Is this working? Is this on? Let's see. It's on. There we go. Here we go. Okay, so we're at negotiate offers. Have any of you guys missed any of like these classes so far? Kyle, what's up, man? Good. Did any of you guys miss any of these? You did? Which one did you miss? All of them. Yeah. Judd, where the hell were you? Oh, you need to quit your other job. I will tell you, I don't really pull any punches on some things. One is, it is going to be very hard for you to be good as a part-time agent. It just is. Okay? You're competing with people who do this full-time for the same clients. And people may hire you still, and that's great. But what's one of the things that when people sign a buyer broker or a listing agreement with you, you have a fiduciary duty to them, right? Part of that is honesty. If you were honest with people, would you tell them, hey, I actually don't do this full-time? Hey, I actually only sold 2 houses last year.
Depends who your client is.
What's that?
Depends who your client is.
I mean, honesty would almost like require you to say, now, of course, you're not going to say that, right? But we're talking like full disclosure. How's it going? What's your name? Paul? I'm Cody. Have you been in a class here before? Have you been in Ignite courses yet? This is your first one. Sweet. Welcome. I'm sorry in advance. But yeah, so you want to get transactions under your belt as quickly as you can, okay? Because have you heard people say already, Cameron might have said it to you, time in the business is not as valuable as time on the business, okay? What that means is time spent in transactions, negotiating, closing deals, doing inspections, negotiating repairs, all this kind of stuff, right? That is way more valuable than years having your license, okay? And whether it's you talking to another agent or a client that is interviewing agents, if someone brings up early on in a conversation how long they've been in the industry, ignore everything else they say. Because they're trying to hang their hat on the fact they've been an agent for a long time because they don't have recent success to hang their hat on. Right? I would way more trust someone to know what's going on in the market and what can happen from someone who did 25 deals last year than someone who's been in the industry 25 years but did 2 deals last year. Right? The person who did 25 deals last year is so much more better equipped to tell me what's going on right now in the current market, what things can happen, what we can get away with, what loan products are out there for me if buyer, right? But so it's unfortunate that some of you guys have missed some of these. So like make and receive offers, we're going to go through part of that today anyway, but like I will tell you, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but in the make and receive offers part, you guys need to know the documents you're working with. Know them in and out. Know the strengths and the weaknesses of every one of them, because it can work to your advantage. There are a lot of agents you'll be working with who don't understand the documents that you're about to send them or that they're about to send you. They don't understand some of the language in there and what it really means, and you can really use it to your advantage to absolutely get them over a barrel and get what you want. Okay, and we'll talk about some of those. And I've got a whiteboard because I'm going to draw out some things that I've been able to negotiate and talk through how that happened. Okay, so this is kind of the agenda, what we're going to go through a little bit. All right, Kira, will you read this for us, nice and loud? Okay, you guys, most people, not just realtors, most people view negotiation as confrontation. Okay, they don't see a difference. Okay, because of that, do you think most people like confrontation? No, most people are so scared of confrontation, and that's okay. We're going to use that to our advantage because negotiation is not confrontation. It's not, right? And if you approach it as it's just a thing that has to happen, right? Every transaction, there's negotiation happening all the time. Even let's not even talk about in a transaction. When you're trying to win buyers, when you're trying to win sellers, there's a negotiation going on here, right? What I'm doing before I have clients all the time who, so for example, I got a call 2 months ago-ish, 2 months ago-ish, from someone said, hey, Cody, we got your number from our son, so-and-so. I didn't know who their son was. Had no idea. He's an appraiser up in Davis County. Our home listed for sale, for sale by owner, and we're not getting any action. He told us we need to hire a realtor. He gave us your number. I had no idea at the time how he got my number, who he was. Okay, but so we're interviewing some agents. He's sent us a few others. You're one of them. Can we interview you? So I go over, and the first thing they want to talk about is what? Commission, right? What will you take? Okay. Negotiation had begun the minute they opened the door, right? I won't talk commission rate with my clients, with customers like that early. I just won't. Because what I tell them, and this is something as you're trying to win buyers and sellers, I say, hey, let's not discuss that yet because I don't have like hard lines. I don't. I'm willing to do something that works for both of us. But before we ever get there, you need to decide if you would even want to hire me. If you wouldn't want to hire me and you hire me just because my commission is low, then you're hiring me for the wrong reason anyway. You need to decide if you would want to hire me, then let's talk numbers, right? The negotiation has begun, but now the negotiation starts with, I'm going to sell you on why I'm worth what I'm going to tell you I charge, right? If you give people an answer, you've been in sales before, yeah? When people ask the price of something, really, if you give them, you're done because there's no value to the number they just heard, right? And this is no different. When you're negotiating self, commission-wise, there's no value to the commission rate you're about to tell them until you give value to that commission rate. And if you give them the number first, everything after you're losing. Okay? So when people try to ask you what you will take, well, so-and-so will take 1%, will you do that? So will take 1.5%, will you do that? My answer is always like, I'm not opposed to doing that if that's what we have to do. But let's talk about who this person is. If they're offering 1% and you're going and talking to other people, why is that? It's because you don't want to hire them, even though they're only 1%, or else you would have hired them. So clearly they're not worth only 1%. So let's talk about why you don't want to hire the person that will take 1%. Okay, so this is all a part of this though, okay? So get really comfortable at negotiating and I would work as much as you can, and it's not gonna be easy for everybody. I'm one of those annoying people that Kyle's been around me here and there since we were kids-ish. I'm one of those annoying people that not a lot of things make me uncomfortable. That's just how I am. And unfortunately, I have a 9-year-old son that's the same way, and I wish things made him uncomfortable because he's annoying. He's off. He's annoying. What's going on? But this is something that I would work really hard at. Just nothing is uncomfortable. And your clients, customers, whatever, they will sometimes, you can feel them getting uncomfortable. And that's when you need to put the brakes on, say, hey, we can talk about anything. Nothing is off the table. None of this is uncomfortable. These are things we need to talk about. It sort of like gives them this like sigh of relief. Okay. And that's when you're looking at homes that are all beyond their budget, right? But they don't want to say it. Hey, I don't need you to buy one of these homes. So I can tell like something's got us off. Let's just stop. Let's talk about why, like what's got us feeling uncomfortable. So get comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, which goes into negotiating, okay? Any questions so far? Comments? Okay. All right. So what is negotiation? So let's go through this. So this is the Keller Williams. I think I mentioned last time, there's some of this. I don't know if I'm being recorded right now or not. I might be. If I am, I'm sorry. Some of this is just, I don't agree. I don't believe it. Okay? Mean it, like starting with the first one. Okay? Remind me, Alex, read the very first line. Okay, what does that mean to you? What do you think they're referring to? No, so this, by the way, is referring to mostly in like a transaction, okay? Something you're negotiating between the two parties.
Saying like both parties have to be completely satisfied or no deal.
It needs to be a win-win, right? Keller Williams believes, wrongly, that it needs to be a win for both parties or else it doesn't work for anybody. Hey guys, who do you work for? Do you work for buyer and seller? At this brokerage, you can't anyway. We don't do limited agency here. Did you know that? You cannot represent both buyer and seller at this brokerage, okay? It's probably a healthy thing. But if you can only work for one party, do you care? And should you care if it's a win for the person on the other side?
Them, if they end up selling their house, even if they don't feel like they won necessarily on the price, they still got what they wanted, which was selling the house, which is a win.
Yeah, I don't care what they feel if they signed it. If they signed it, that's all that matters, right? Like, I'm not taking advantage of anybody. Like, I'm not doing anything illegal, unethical. If they sign it, they sign it. Right? Whether they consider it a win or not, I don't care. There is something that we pushed for, negotiated for. If they gave it to us, they gave it to us. They decided to do that. Okay? So I will tell this, I think the win-win or no deal, ladies specifically, real estate, the majority of real estate agents in Utah at least are female. Okay, I don't know if you knew that. Licensed agents, the majority are female. And I think that the female influence in the industry has given this sort of like, we want this all to be like very kumbaya. Everyone needs to feel good about the transaction. And like, I don't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. And that's great. Don't be an a-hole, right? But at the same time, I work for one party in this transaction, right? And as long as I am being ethical about how I do things and fulfilling my fiduciary duty to my client, then I'm good. Okay? And representing my client fully means that I don't worry myself about if it's a win for the other side. I am worried about getting a win for my client. Okay? And I tell my clients all the time before they hire me, when we're working, hey, look, my job and my goal is to get you as much of what I can and give as little away to get it as possible. That's my job. That's what you hired me for. Okay? All right, so these are the paths of negotiation that are sort of like accepted and the norm in real estate. Okay. So the first is you see a home, and we'll look at this from the buyer side, okay? So you see a home, you like it, your client wants to make an offer. You make an offer, it gets accepted, and then you get through to close, okay? If you are on the buyer side, and this is how your transaction goes, tell me what that means about that transaction. You made an offer, they accepted it, and you closed. What does that mean? You gave too much of something. If the seller accepts your first offer, you gave too much of something. Right? There should be a little heartache and like heartburn from a seller negotiating well, which usually results in a counteroffer of some sort. I hate when they accept my first offer because I'm like, dang it, could have gone lower, could have asked for more of this or that, right? Most agents, this is the path that they want. They do. Easy, at least, right? It's easier, right? So, and they're not, like, I don't blame them, especially when you've got a buyer. Like, I have buyers that I've shown like 40 plus homes. By the time like the offer comes, this would be really nice at that point, right? But if I'm fully like invested in representing my client well, that's not the way I want it to go, because that means that we gave too much. In my opinion, that means you gave too much.
Desperate seller, like.
That means I probably could have paid less, right? Or gotten more of something else, right? So whether it's, maybe I couldn't have paid less, maybe that's the bottom of the barrel I would have accepted, but maybe I could have also gotten the refrigerator. Maybe I could have also gotten the hot tub that they didn't want. Maybe I could have gotten more of the timeline that I wanted, less earnest money, right? Like, and we'll talk through different like terms that you can negotiate, because this isn't all about price. And that's the thing I think we get stuck on too much as realtors, is the price is like the main point of negotiation. And it is, but it shouldn't always be. And we'll talk through some of why that is. Okay. All right, so let's talk through option 2. This is like the better, more ideal transaction process. You make an offer, they either reject it or counter. So by the way, if they reject it, almost nobody does, by the way, just so you know, in terms of like actual like in writing rejection. They will tell you sometimes like, that doesn't work, and you like adjust something. But generally people don't send like an actual written rejection. They should, but they don't. Oh, by the way, if you make an offer, so we talked about, did any of you attend the writing offers class? No, okay. When you make an offer and your acceptance deadline lapses, then you get a counter offer after that. You don't have to extend that acceptance deadline, okay? That counter offer reinstates this whole thing, all right? So on the counter offer, they've got an acceptance, so let's say I made an offer today, my acceptance deadline is noon tomorrow, 5 p.m. tomorrow, I get a counter offer with an acceptance deadline of noon Sunday. I don't have to address the fact that my acceptance deadline on my offer has lapsed. We don't need to do anything with that. The counter offer sort of like reinstates that, okay? Exactly. It's a deadline to accept everything that's in here. If you're gonna change the terms, then that's a moot point anyway, okay? You'll have agents that tell you you need to adjust it because again, they don't understand the paperwork they're working with. You'll find that is very common, okay? Anyway, so this is the more ideal, right? You make an offer, they reject or counter, you negotiate here, then they accept or reject, and you get through to close. What I want to talk about here is you show a house, you like the house, you want to make an offer on the house, okay? Here's your offer, here's they say in the negotiations. Where do you think the negotiations should start?
Starting really at the offer, you're framing your offer.
Okay.
Setting an anchor.
So,
Talk about it.
yeah. So like, yeah. So for most people, yes. That's when they begin negotiating, is with the offer, okay? If you really want to win, and when I say win, again, I'm only referring to getting more of what you can for your client, right? Getting more by giving less, okay? That's what we're talking about negotiating for. Negotiations should start way before you're drafting an offer, right? Do you remember last time we talked about looking up the agents on the other side of the transaction? Okay, did you know that you can do that? Okay, do all of you guys have access to the MLS yet? like logins? Okay. On the MLS, you can go sort by sold, go back however long, 6 months, and you can sort by agent. Or you can even just like search them in the roster and it'll show you in the last 12 months all the properties they sold and any active listings they have. Why does that matter?
How eager they are to get something down. See their experience, they know what to accept or reject.
Mhm.
Or if they're haven't sold anything, they probably
Yeah, it can give you an idea of the agent's motivation. Also, you can get an idea of their experience, right? So I've had agents on the other side that they don't tell me, but they don't know that I know this is their first transaction. And most of the people you interact with, and when you make your first offer, they won't know because no one looks people up. I don't know why they don't, but they don't. They won't know that it's your first transaction. I would know, and I would use that against you. Okay? Most people don't do it. When I say this, for whatever reason, people still don't go and do it. I was teaching a negotiation course at my last brokerage, and one of the guys on my team, and it was part of like what I negotiated for like my office discount. He's like, why are you like going and teaching people how you do what you do? Because they're not going to go do it. Because most people, it takes either too much mental energy or it makes them uncomfortable. So it doesn't matter. I'll teach it to. So, and there are people that I've taught my negotiation course, how I do what I do, all the process I go through. And then like 2 months later, I'm getting an offer from them and they don't do any of this stuff that we talked about in the course. Right? Because again, most people, it makes them uncomfortable or it takes a lot of mental energy. Okay, because it does, right? It's exhausting, mentally exhausting. But so the first thing I'm doing when I show home my client likes it, wants to make an offer, first thing I do is look up that agent. I want to know about the agent on the other side, right? And not just, are they busy right now? Have they closed many transactions? I want to see as well, hey, it looks like all their business is in Ogden, but they've got this one listing in Saratoga Springs. So guess what they don't want to do? They probably do most of their business in Ogden. They probably live in Ogden. Their brokerage is in Ogden. They don't want to drive down here all the freaking time. They want this off their plate, right? Because this is beyond the scope of where they normally work. That's good to know. If it's a St. George agent that just happens to be listing this one home up here, same thing, right? So you want to kind of get an idea of who am I working with. Negotiations have already started. I'm starting to get a picture of the motivation that this agent may have, okay? Then we move on to the phone call to the listing agent. You should never be drafting an offer if you have not called the listing agent, ever. Now, they may not always answer, but you want to talk to them. Why do you want to talk to them? Not just text them. Why do you want to talk to them?
They overshare.
They say things they shouldn't say. You don't say things you shouldn't say, but there's nothing wrong with you getting them to say things they shouldn't say.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so,
I'm fairly new.
Yeah.
Not 2 years, but there's a lot of people here who haven't, so maybe this might be helpful for them to know, and for me.
yeah, go for it.
Share.
So I was in your class since then. Showed one of my buyers a couple of homes. I did what you said, looked up the agents, found out what we could. And from that, I kind of had the information like, hey, these agents don't have a lot of experience in one home that he sold the house to this person last year.
Mhm.
The house is back up for sale. So this buyer or this seller's obviously in a distressed situation. And it was also, he's done 2 deals in the last 12 months, one of them being that deal. Like, you can tell that this isn't a super tight spot.
Yep.
I called him up. He told me everything, gave me the inspection report of the last year. So like, we were already ahead before we even got in an offer or anything. I knew exactly
Yep.
what the motivation of the seller was, how much money he had. We asked for more than that, got more than that.
And again, and just, you don't need to feel bad. Okay? Like there are times where similarly, I had a client just recently close on a house that, and again, look through the MLS history, please, before you do anything else, right? Look through the MLS history. You'll see that it was sold a year ago, right? These are all things that you can find. Something's going on, They're not selling because they want to, they're selling because they have to. That means they've probably got a ticking clock. They might be behind on mortgage payments. They might be getting a divorce. Maybe they have to like leave the state. They're relocating for something, right? That means they have to sell the house. People don't list their house a year after they buy it because they want to, right? So that's super great research.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. That's good. So one of the few who does things I teach. But, oh gosh, Judd. You'll keep doing this and you'll be able to make enough that you can. But like this is, it all begins, right? Like, so getting an agent to just tell you things like, oh, they're getting a divorce. So I ask questions that seem like super innocuous. Like, I'm like, hey, Alex, Cody Fehlberg, KW Westfield, just showed your listing yesterday, and my clients may freaking love it. We want to make an offer. I'm not saying that. They're like, hey, so it's one of the ones that my clients are considering. It may be the only one it's one of the ones my clients are considering. And I just, as we're kind of like looking through, I just want to get a little bit of, what your seller situation is. What do they need from us is the way I frame it. Okay? Because what does this make it sound like to that listing agent? I'm trying to help them. Let me help you. Let me make your life easy, right? What does your seller need from us? And then now I can follow that up with questions that get answers they wouldn't be giving me. Well, what's their current situation? Where are they headed? Do they already have another home? Right? What kind of timeline do they need? And this is where agents they just say stupid things, honestly. Well, they're getting a divorce. You idiot. Don't tell me that. I think we talked about last time. The more sellers there are, the better when you're on the buyer side. Why? A $30,000 price reduction is not $30,000. There's 3 of you. It's 10 to you, 10 to you, 10 to you, right? So nothing hits as hard because they're sharing it. Whether it's a divorce, whether it's a trust, parents have passed away and they're selling mom and dad's house, right? These are all things that are good for you to find out, because if you find out, oh, not only is it a trustee sale, there are 6 siblings. Awesome. Awesome. Because now that 40 grand, that's only like 6 and some change to each of you.
No question, but when people like ask you when you're a seller, how do you like make sure you don't say too much?
How do you deflect that?
Yeah.
Is that,
I mean, it kind of depends what the question is. So what question?
What do they need
from us?
from us?
Just like always, net is the most important thing. They want to go quick, right? Like, net number is super important. We want to go quick. We know we've priced it really well. And we've staged it really nicely. We've got a lot of showings. So I don't think that they're feeling real urgent yet. These are the things I want to say.
But you don't like give any, like, if they ask what's the current situation?
No, not really. Like very vague. The other thing is, if you are on the listing side, so for example, I had a home that I listed last Friday. We went under contract, full list price, cash offer on Sunday. Okay, and do you know how I did it? So the listing went live, I guess, Friday morning. I don't allow any showings until the open house. Because at the open house, which I do my own open houses, by the way, unless I absolutely can't. If I have like multiple listings go live the same week, and now I have to have like 2 open houses on Saturday, I can't physically be at both, right? That's the only time I have someone do my open house. So I'll do my own open houses because I've been hired to sell the house. So who's going to present a better open house and experience for people coming through than me, who knows more about the home, motivated in selling the home, not just picking up a client, right? So I do my own open house. So I didn't let anybody come through. And guess what? Like, we had like 16 groups of people come through, and half of them were neighbors. The people who aren't neighbors, who are seriously shopping for their own house, they don't know their neighbors. All they see are more people who are interested in this house. So when they make an offer, that offer will be better than it would have been otherwise if they just came through for a showing.
Tell your clients to have their friends in the neighborhood come by.
No, not necessarily. But like I tell them neighbors know that they're going to be doing an open house. Because again, like I told, like, hey, tell your neighbors this is their chance to help pick their new neighbors. So if they have friends and family who are interested in looking, we go house Saturday. But also now there are more and more buyers who are thinking at least that they want to represent themselves, right? I want those people to be able to get in. How do I do that? An open house. So I do an open house, and then if I get sign calls and stuff like that, I show it myself. I don't just, hey, there's a buyer that wants to see this, and anybody can go over and do. No, I want to do that. I'm going to give a better experience and do better at selling the house, right? And this is all part of this negotiation, right? All of it. I'm presenting the value before we get to what the price is going to be, okay? So, but when I'm on the buy side, that negotiation begins when I look up the agent and then I call the agent and try to get info. Because they're either giving away their leverage or they're gaining leverage by telling me what's going on. Oh, hey, we've got an offer in hand. We've had 6 showings today. We've got 5 more tomorrow. And that's information that's helpful for me as a buyer's agent. I can go back to my client and be like, hey, sounds like we may have to compete for this one if we want it. I'm not telling you we should do that. Here's what the comps say. What do you want to do? Do we want to try to compete? If you tell me you want to compete, I can win. And I'll get it for you less than anyone else would pay to get it. I promise. We're going to throw in some other terms here, and we're going to talk through some of those terms. But this is where like all of that comes into play. Okay, you want the agent on the other side, when there's multiple offers, you want the agent on the other side to be invested in having you be the one that gets it, because they think, rightly or wrongly, that like, oh man, Cody's gonna make my life easy. Cody, his buyers are with his preferred lender. And they're through a full approval, not just a phone call pre-approval. They know, and here's why that's important when you're on the listing side, is you'll get offers with a pre-approval, and most loan officers right now, and it sucks, it's super annoying because where rates are high, loan officers know that when their buyer, their client sees what that payment is gonna be, they're gonna have a heart attack. So they don't tell them. They say, oh, you're qualified for this. Yeah, you can spend up to this. They know their budget, that's all they know. Because technically you can qualify for it, right? They're hoping that those people go out, make an offer, and get under contract on a home before they see what that payment will be. Because now they're emotionally invested in a home, so now they're more likely to deal with that high payment when they wouldn't have earlier on. I don't let my buyers do that. We're going to talk through where the payment will be. Hey, so I know you were approved at this, but that puts your payment here. Does that even work? No, that doesn't work. Okay, then let's adjust the budget. We're not shopping at 600 if you're only comfortable with a payment at 520. Right? And again, this is where I'm cheap. I think I told you guys this last time. I'm cheap. I don't like to spend my money. I don't like to spend my clients' money either. I want to show them that I'm going to be judicious with their wallet the same way I am with mine. Okay? And this is how you build lifelong clients. I care about your money even when you don't sometimes. Okay? So to me, the negotiation starts here. Okay? Then we make our offer. And a lot of times I talk through the verbal like points of the offer before I draft and send it to a listing agent. Okay? Talk through all of that. Then I make my offer. Then we negotiate again, hopefully, right? Or else that may mean that we've paid too much, right? If they accept our initial offer, negotiate again, and then you get through to close. Okay? Does anybody have any questions, comment on any of this yet?
We called the agent and they have multiple offers, they have live showings. You got to be a little more competitive. Are you still wanting to get countered with that offer, or are you trying to beat the rush a little bit by offering something that your client is comfortable with, even if it's asking price?
Yeah.
Are you trying to get that accepted before 5 more people get a chance to walk through it tomorrow?
Both. Both. Yeah, for sure. So the way that my clients, we use, with all my clients, they laugh and then they like my clients often will call me and be like, okay, Cody, let's lick the muffin. And the reason they say that is because like, I tell my clients like, hey, making an offer is not scary. Do you remember when you were a kid and you would like lick food so your siblings wouldn't eat it? Okay. That's what we're doing. That's what an offer is for. Okay? Because right now, if you go through a house and see it and love it and want to buy it, who gets to decide if you buy that house? No, you don't. If the seller doesn't accept your offer, you don't get to buy that house, right? So who decides? The seller does. I'm trying to take the decision away from the seller and get it in my hands, right? I want to decide if I get to buy this house or not. So the purpose of an offer is not to necessarily like put in stone what the terms will be. The purpose of the offer is, hey, I'm going to get it off the market. So now the seller is committed. I am not. Okay. Do you guys know how like earnest money works? Okay. So let's say you put in $5,000 of earnest money. Is that refundable to you, the buyer, if you cancel? Until when? Finance and appraisal deadline. Okay. When is the seller committed and how and by how much? Okay. So can a seller cancel?
Not really.
Okay. What can they do instead? They can default. So a seller can't cancel, they can only default. Buyer can cancel or default. Seller can only default. And this is where it's important that you understand the contract, okay? Seller can only default, but there are repercussions if a seller defaults. Do you know what those are? They're written out in the REPC. There are four options. One is whatever your earnest money amount was as the buyer, the seller has to match it out of their pocket. So the buyer gets the earnest money back, seller has to match it. Okay, so it costs them money. But that's only if the buyer accepts that as an acceptable solution. The buyer can say, nope, I'm going to sue you to enforce the contract. Or I'm going to sue you for whatever the crap else I want to sue you for. And that locks up that property where they can't sell that to anybody else now while that's all going on and being adjudicated. Okay, so a seller cannot cancel. They can only default. So that's why if I get it off the market under contract, the seller isn't going to cancel. Right? So my house, I'll tell you, I don't know if I talked about this last time. My house that I am in right now, it was in the middle of 2021. It was a zoo, right? I was showing a house in South Vineyard. This one came on the market. My wife and I had been looking, but like we hadn't even discussed Vineyard. But this house came up. It looked great. I called the listing agent, and the listing agent is out of St. George. And it says on it, this was a Thursday, says on it, no showings till the open house Saturday. I call him, he says, oh, I'm not really representing him. He made an offer on a home down here, and it's contingent on the sale of his home up there, which the contingent, the subject to sale of buyer's property addendum requires that you have your home listed on the MLS within 7 days of going under contract, okay? So it can't, for sale by owner doesn't work, has to be listed on the MLS. So he paid this dude like $500 to put it on the MLS, and he still represent himself. So that agent down there just tells me, hey, he's got a ticking clock. He has to get that under contract. So I called, or I just drive by the house. I didn't call it. So I drove by the house and knocked on the door. This Thursday, no showings till the open house Saturday. He's like, oh, we're not doing any showings till open house. I'm like, hey, I'm here. I live in South Jordan. I'm a realtor. Can I just like, can you show me around? He's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. So we walk around. The home was listed at $840. I knew he would get higher offers than that, but he didn't know that I knew he's under contract on a home down there. And there's work that he wants to do on that home down there. So I'm going to give him more of what he wants to get more of what I want, which is this house, and not have to compete with everybody for it. So I say, hey, I'll take it off the market right now. Let's go under contract. I'll pay your asking price. I'll waive appraisal. And I'll give you 60 days to stay in the home after we close for $0. You can stay. He says, awesome. Okay, we go under contract. Oh, and the average person thinks more, if you're a seller, the average seller thinks more earnest money is great, right? Awesome, they're more committed. So I threw $25,000 earnest money down, which is way more than normal on an $800,000 house. He thought that was awesome. He still does his open house Saturday and gets offers that are, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 higher than what we're under contract at. And he hadn't taken into account that I was going to remove the commission from the sale too. He's like, no, but you're representing yourself. I'm like, yeah, but we never addressed that. You had on the MLS, you were paying 2.5%. So I'm removing 2.5%. No, I think I'll just go accept one of these other offers. I'm like, JD, sorry, man, you can't do that. Why? You can't cancel. Yes, I can. Read the contract. You can default. Do you want to pay me $25,000 to make $2,000 more? And that's only if I say that's okay. I can lock it up and you'll lose your house in St. George. He's like, you're taking advantage of me. You knew I was a realtor. You opted to not hire someone. If you're going to represent yourself, you need to know what you're doing. Right?
You need to do it at the end, right?
Oh, yeah. He shut off all the water and killed the front and backyard. But guess who paid to put sod in the front and backyard? He did.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, because it wasn't the same condition as when you went under contract.
So all of these things, right? Like these are all points of negotiation, right? The earnest money, more earnest money isn't necessarily better for a seller than lower, right? There's a healthy like balance there because it's fully refundable to the buyer if they want it. But the higher that is, that puts the seller at risk. What if you lose your job and now you can't buy that new house you were going to buy and you need to stay, right? You couldn't control it. You had no way of knowing. And now you're going to have to reimburse the buyer $15,000 to stay in your own house, right? So there's like a healthy balance of all these things that you need to be aware of and talking through with your client.
So once you pay the earnest money and they accept it, they can't cancel. That's what it is.
Once you go under contract, the seller can't cancel unless the buyer gives the reason like breach of contract, right? Like if the buyer never deposits the earnest money, right there, the seller can cancel.
But like once they accept or under contract.
So once you're under contract, the seller cannot cancel unless the buyer has a breach of contract. Yep. So if the buyer doesn't live up to something in the contract. Yep. So again, these are the good things for you to know so it can help you like be strategic about how to negotiate things, right? So on the listing side, more earnest money is better to a point. So if like you're selling a $600,000 house and they're offering $3,000 earnest money, that's too low. It should be in the range of 1%. So like if I was listing a home for like $600,000, $5,000 is probably the lowest I would accept earnest money wise. Because if they don't have access to more cash than that anyway, that probably means that anything that's not perfect about the house and needs to be repaired or something like that, they're going to be asking me to pay for that too because they don't have the cash. So it's not a great sign if they only have access to like $2,000, right? So these are all things that you want to kind of like be thinking ahead. How is this going to impact future parts of this transaction? Okay, deadlines are the same thing. Sorry, go ahead.
So I just said the more the better.
Like I said, not necessarily. Well, it depends on the situation, right? Like as a seller, you don't want like a $20,000 earnest money on a $500,000 house. That's not great because what if something happens and you now can't sell the house? Now it's different. Every situation is different, right? I just had a home. I had 2 homes that sold on Monday, that closed on Monday. One of them was like a vacant home. It's a trust. The owner, she's still alive, but she's in a nursing home now. Her kids were working with me to help sell the house, but no one's in it. We're selling it. Nothing will happen that makes us not sell the house. Nothing. So that, more earnest money, great, good. Throw as much as you want in there. But if it's somewhere like you're living and what's precipitating the move? Have you already bought the new house? Okay, then nothing's going to stop you. But if you haven't bought the new house, or if you're under contract, but what if you lost your job or something like that, right? So you just need to like talk through these things with your client and make sure you're giving them good advice. Because negotiating like earnest money up isn't really always helping you. And if you could get the earnest money up or get a 4-day sooner close, which one is better for your client? And that's where you've got to help them figure that out, right? More earnest money is as good for us as closing early is, because we're going to get that money either way. So it doesn't really help us. Closing earlier helps us because it costs you less as a seller. That's fewer days of taxes, interest, and everything that I have to pay. Okay, so these are all like terms of the negotiation that we're going to talk through, right? Here's the hardest part of negotiating in real estate. Okay, you guys remember when you were in school and you played telephone? Okay, like You'd start, and by the time it gets to the end, it's never what you started with, right? Okay? This is why it's hard. You are here, right? Or you're here, whatever. Just because I tell something to the seller's agent doesn't mean that's what the seller hears. So I've got to get this agent on the other side to a point where I feel confident they will be able to and will present it to their client in the way I want them to. Okay, and that's tricky. That's the hardest part of negotiating in real estate is I don't even get to negotiate with the person that is making this decision. But we even, I think, underestimate the influence that we have over what our clients will and won't accept. And there are agents that I know I can just like bully them into telling their client to do what I want them to do. There are agents that when I see they're showing one of my listings, I'm like, if their client likes this, we're getting everything we want. Because they just, and some of them are busy, high producing agents. They just want transactions done. They don't really have a lot of investment in fighting hard to get their client more. And that's great for me, right? But this is the hardest part because you've got to negotiate with this person through this person. So I've got to find some motivation for this person to be wanting this person to accept what I'm pitching them on. They've got to want to accept it, but they've got to want them to want to accept it. Does that make sense? It's kind of funky. But again, this is why this takes so much mental energy, right? You should never be picking up the phone and calling an agent on the other side or texting an agent on the other side without playing out how this conversation is going to go. So you need to know first off, hold on, let's see. I'm going to go here and then we're going to go back. Okay. You should never phone call or send a text to an agent on the other side without knowing the goal. So I got a call from an agent a while ago. She goes, hey, Cody, we don't have the appraisal back yet. And this was like the day before our financing appraisal deadline, okay? We don't have the appraisal back yet. I was like, okay. What are you asking? Well, we need to push the financing appraisal deadline. No, we don't. Why? Do we have to? Me as a seller, do I have to push the financing appraisal deadline back? No. Does the buyer actually have to push it back either? What is that? What is the financing appraisal deadline for? What is that? So just so you know, like they have to go back to final underwriting before you can close, right? So in the normal transaction or normal deadlines transaction, the flow is normally due diligence is anywhere from like 10 to 14 days, okay? Finance and appraisal is usually like 18 to 22 days or so, somewhere in there, like about 3 weeks-ish. But they're usually not closing for another week or so. So usually after the finance and appraisal, they go in for final underwriting before they get the clear to close. So they don't actually have a clear to close and know 100% that they're going to be able to close for the financing and appraisal deadline anyway. So what is the financing and appraisal deadline then? Because you can't have, I won't say can't, you don't have the stamp clear to close by the financing and appraisal deadline anyway. So what is the deadline for?
Then you fire back out and receive all of their earnest money.
But what are they supposed to be trying to accomplish by then, I guess is the point.
Know that they can get financing to buy things.
Or at least as close to no, right? That's really what it is. You've gone through enough to feel confident that we'll be able to close, okay? Financing is not going to be an issue, right? And the appraised value is part of that. Okay, so she says, we have to push this deadline back. No, we don't. Well, we don't have the appraisal back. Okay. Are you concerned about the value? No. Then why would we push this back? If you're not concerned about it appraising at the value that we're at, because I'm not either, then why would we push this deadline back? As a seller, what's the reason I would ever push that back? So if you're on the receiving end of that, how do you respond to that? Why would I give them this thing that they want? All right, let me talk to my client. Let me see what we can do. And now we're going to come up with something that is worth us letting you move this back. So we actually closed 4 days earlier. So ended up saving my clients some money, right? And what we did was, and this is where like it kind of like defeated the purpose of them wanting to move the deadline back. Is that, okay, we can move the finance and appraisal deadline back, but we want $1,000 of your earnest money non-refundable now. Not all of it. We want 1,000 non-refundable now. We'll move the deadline back and you'll close 4 days earlier. They're not going to lose out of $1,000, right? Like unless they're an idiot, they'll cancel rather than lose that. And we didn't even make it non-refundable the next day, which was what their finance and appraisal deadline was. Upon signing this addendum, they have $1,000 non-refundable now. We'll push the deadline back 2 days. So we only pushed it back 2 days. Appraisal was fine. But we got to close a little earlier. So my clients saved a little bit of money on the sale, right? Just peace of mind, they're done. We got what we wanted and didn't really have to give away much to get it. Okay, so, but she called me not really knowing what the goal was. She thought, oh, the appraisal will be back. We have to move this back. No, you don't. She had no idea how I was going to respond. So what you need to do before you make any phone call or before you text any agent is you need to know, what am I trying to get and what is their response going to be to the thing I'm asking for? How would I respond if I'm on the other side of that? I think I mentioned to you guys, my wife hates riding in the car with me when I have these kinds of things on my mind because I make her like role play it with me. She hates it. And if she's not there with me, I like talk through it on my own in my car. People think I'm crazy. Like I've had friends pull up next to me watching me talk to myself and they will honk at me and make fun of me, right? But it helps because, okay, if I were to call me and say, hey, this is what's going on, here's what we need, how would I respond to that? And then with that, how would I respond to that response, right? Like I try to play this all out in my head ahead of time so that I have a better path to getting the thing that I want. So if I know my goal, I can work backwards, right? It's basically like, you remember when you were a kid and you did the mazes and you always had that one sibling that would cheat and they'd start at the end and they'd go backwards to the beginning? I don't know if I have a brother that cheated every time we did that kind of crap. Anyway, so like that's basically what this is, right? Like I've got the goal, I know where I want to be. Let's work backwards. How do I get that? Right? And that's what you want to do here. Okay? But also, like I said, you want to find out who you're working with so I can sell them on why they should sell this to their client. They should be, at the end of this conversation, they should be wanting their client to give us the thing we're asking for. Now, maybe that's because I'm giving them something they want as well, but that's what you're shooting for in these phone calls and texts. I want them to want their client to give me what I'm asking. Okay? You have a question? You look confused or stressed.
My head, and then you're talking over it, so it's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me to give you a minute?
No, I just.
It's a lot because this is not the way that most people think or do this. I understand that. But part of the reason that I've been able to, like in a relatively short time, do the amount of business that I've done is because no one does this. So if you do it, you're already so much above most of the people around you.
Giving us cheat.
And the hard part is it's not even a cheat code. It's just like people are just, and I won't be lazy. It's just, it's a lot, right? Most people don't want to make their own job this hard.
What makes you better, and you have clients coming back.
Yeah, my clients get more of what they want, you know? Okay, so let's talk through the kinds of like the terms that you're negotiating, right? So price is the big one, and then not just price, but just money, okay? So we'll talk like money, right? Net. So price is not just price, it's price minus whatever concessions, okay? Because to a seller, whether it's $600,000 and $20,000 in concessions or whether it's $580,000, it's the same. Or is it? It's the same? Does a seller make more or less money selling at 600 with 20 in concessions over selling at 580? Is there a difference? Do you know? It's okay if you don't know. The listing agreement now, it didn't used to do this. The listing agreement now stipulates commission is paid gross sales price. So that means that if you're a seller and they're paying this for the home and asking for this amount in concessions, they're still paying commissions on that concessions amount. It's super stupid. It sucks. But that's how the commissions agreements are written out. Okay. So for a seller, they still do make more money on a lower sales price as opposed to a higher sales price with concessions. Okay, because paying 5% or whatever the listing is total, right? Paying 5% on that extra 20 grand is still, money out of their pocket. Okay, we good? Questions? Is this confusing? It's okay, go ahead. Oh, good question, sorry. Concessions are, so basically, in this current market, I would say that we're probably at an average of like 2% in concessions. Meaning, if I'm offering $500,000 for your house, the average buyer is negotiating about $10,000 in concessions to pay their closing costs or to buy their rate down to get a lower payment. Okay, so concessions is basically any money that the seller's contributing towards what it costs the buyer to close.
Sellers pay.
Yeah, so it's called a seller paid concession. So are any of you guys familiar with what a 2-1 buy down is? Okay, a lot of buyers are looking for a 2-1 buy down because rates are high right now. So a 2-1 buy down, that costs about 2% of the sales price. Okay, and what it does is it lowers their interest rate in the first year by 2%. So on a $500,000 home, that's probably like $600-700 a month off their payment in the first year. In the second year, it's 1% less than their long-term rate will be. So that's why it's called a 2-1 buy down, right? Only the seller can pay it. So a lot of buyers are asking sellers to pay for that. Okay. So that's what concessions are. Good question. I'm sorry. Yeah, if you have questions about some like the terminology and stuff, free to stop me and have me clarify.
You say you prefer
If I'm on the listing side, if I'm on the buyer side, I want whatever's best for my client, which usually is concessions. Is going to help them more. But I'm on the seller side, I actually would rather a lower sales price and no concessions. My seller will pay less in commission. Yes, I will make less in commission. But again, I tell my clients I'm worried about their wallet as much as I am mine. So I better act like it, right? I better coach them through these kind of things.
Grand really isn't a lot of money for you anyways.
No, it's like, so if it's like if I'm at 3%, 20 grand, my $600.
Not that much. It's way more valuable
Yeah.
than a client that freaking loves you and tells all their friends about you.
Yeah. Okay, does that make sense on the concessions part? Okay, so here when we talk about price, I would say it's price and the concessions, kind of like the net number for the seller. That's really what we're talking about there. Okay, and that's where most agents focus their negotiations is here. But let's say you're in a competing situation. Okay, so we had 3 offers on this home we went under contract on in Vineyard on Sunday. Okay, 3 offers on that home, so there's a competing situation there. The home's only appraised for so much. And people in this current market, they're not going to pay over appraisal. Because do you know how that works? Do you know how the appraisal affects the transaction? If the appraisal is low. So let's say we're under contract at 600 and it appraises at 595. Do you know what happens to that transaction? How does that change it? Okay, can, right? But so what are the outcomes? Okay, so let's say appraisal comes in $5,000 low. There's only 4 potential outcomes, okay? Either the seller drops the price to the appraised value. That's what's happening most right now, if it is low, okay? The other option is the seller doesn't drop it at all. Now the buyer, if they're doing X% down payment, that's all based off of the appraised value. and they've got to pay that additional $5,000 in cash at closing. Okay, no one's doing that right now, but that was happening all the time in like 2020 and 2021. Okay, the third option is seller comes down some, buyer pays some of it in cash at closing. Okay, the fourth option is seller won't budge, buyer won't budge, everybody walks away. Okay, as long as you're before your finance and appraisal deadline. Okay, so getting the price up and up and up doesn't necessarily help me if it's not someone that's willing to pay more than an appraisal would be, right? Unless I know I've listed purposely really low just to get this to go fast and get, you know, some leverage on other terms of the sale, which you'll do that sometimes too, right? But there's a lot beyond just the price, okay? Let's talk through some of the other terms of what are in the real estate purchase contract that could be points of negotiation, okay? So the first one, it's the very first thing listed in the Rep C, is the earnest money. Okay, that could be something that you care about and negotiate. You could negotiate it up if you're a seller, you could negotiate it down if you're a buyer, right? But that's something that is, it's like a fill in the blank. What are we gonna adjust this to? Okay, so that's one thing you can negotiate on. Now, if a buyer has a home to sell, does that mean that the sale of this one is contingent on their purchase of this one is contingent on the sale of that one? Just,
If I'm representing buyer, it is.
okay. What is contingent? Well, I guess let's talk, what does that actually mean? What's that? Okay, it's usually referring to you cannot qualify to buy this if this one doesn't sell, right? So it's like, it's a financing issue, okay? Is usually what that's referring to. So I've had times where buyers have made offers, because they're competing, they don't put that the sale is contingent on the sale of their home, or the contingent on the sale of their home, when really it is. They say, oh, well, but we're not making a contingent on that. That doesn't matter. You cannot buy this house without selling your other one, right? Then therefore you are lying in your purchase contract because you aren't able. If you aren't able, that box should be checked. Even if you say, oh, well, I'm not going to make my offer contingent on that. You can't make that call. Now, that doesn't mean that buyers and their agents don't lie. A lot of people misunderstand what that means. They think it means, well, I'm not going to make it contingent on that. You don't get to decide that. Your financing decides it. Can you, right? Now, just because you can afford to buy it without this one selling, that doesn't mean that you can't put that it's contingent on it. You can say, well, yes, I could, but I want it to be contingent on this, right? So it doesn't work the same on both sides of that. Just because you can qualify for both doesn't mean you can't make it contingent. But if you can't qualify for both, you have to make it contingent. So it's kind of tricky, right? So when I get an offer, if I have multiple especially, and the other problem here is you don't want to be in a dominoes situation, especially if it's like multiple dominoes, right? If my buyer has a home to sell, that's okay. But I'm going to write into the contract, they are not allowed to go under contract on the sale of their home with someone who also has a home to sell. Right? And these are things that, again, a lot of people don't think about. They think, okay, well, your contingency. Okay, but are you accepting my buyer's contingency too? Because that's basically what's happening, right? If I'm kicking the can. So these are things that we would want to negotiate. I would want to write in there, okay, we'll accept your contingency to sell a home, but you are not allowed to accept an offer that is also contingent on the sale of a home. Okay, so that's another term that we can negotiate. Okay, moving on to some other things. By the way, did you know that in the purchase contract, you've looked at like the price section, right? And it kind of breaks it out into like loan amount. You looked through that, like the amount of the loan, basically meaning like how much are they financing of what, how much cash are they bringing, all that kind of stuff. Right in there, it says that the buyer and their lender can change the amount of the loan and the down payment at will without any verification from the seller. Okay? So what I do in every offer when I'm a buyer well, I won't say that. There's some situations that benefits us more to do less. But usually if Kira has 300 grand she could put down, but she's not going to, I'm going to put that she's putting 300 down. Because the seller, that's like, oh, sweet. We're not going to have a financing issue, right? She's great. She's well qualified. She's also got cash, which means if there are repairs, she doesn't need financially, she doesn't need me to fix them to afford making this purchase worth it. It looks better to a seller. Just because she's not going to put $300,000 down doesn't mean I'm not going to put that in there because she can make that decision with her lender. Okay, and it even, like I said, it says that right in there. The buyer and their lender can determine what that, can change that at will, basically.
Sorry, I was writing a note. Did you say you do put a big down payment?
I usually put as much as they could actually do. Now it needs to be, they are actually capable of doing it too, right? So I have a client that we just closed on a home for him, and he had like, a couple $100,000 in a 401k. There's no way he's going to pull that out, liquidate that just to do more down payment when he doesn't need to. He was already at 20% down payment with what he had, right? But that was a situation where it would look better to the seller and get us some things that we want because now we're a better buyer. So I use that because he could. He's not going, but he could. Okay, so that's another point of negotiation here. Recording, okay, or sorry, not recording, possession. Okay, how soon am I getting possession of the house? If it's vacant, recording, right? The minute it's recorded, I want keys. But if they still live there and they've got to move somewhere, am I willing to work with them and be flexible on that? How much time will I give them? And if I'm giving that to them, is it getting me more of what I want somewhere else? Because that needs to be a yes answer. I'll give you the time that you want. And this is why it's important that you talk to that agent. Hey, are they already under contract? They are. Okay, what's their settlement deadline on that? So if they're closing here, like if we're closing the same day, do I want to give them the weekend to move? And if I'm giving them the weekend to move, what am I getting for that? Okay, this is all a give and a take. But the trick is find things you can give that don't change anything for your client, right? And make the listing agent think that these are things that your client doesn't want to give, even if they don't care. So when an agent says, oh, well, they'll need a week, be like, oh, okay. All right, we might need to go faster than that. Let me see what I can do. Okay, I'm making them think I'm going to go sell this to my client. I'll be like, hey, we're good. We're going to give them the week they want, make them have some heartburn over it because we're going to ask for this instead. Okay, so possession is another one. Home warranty, you can ask for a home warranty to be paid for, right? You can ask for concessions, right? We talked about that. And make sure you know your limits. If it's a conventional loan, the maximum amount of concessions the seller can pay is 3% of the purchase price. If it's an FHA or a VA loan or a USDA loan, you can get up to 6% in concessions from the seller. But I mentioned last time, there are ways around this too, things that we've done to be creative to get more concessions without it throwing up roadblocks to our financing. There are things that you can do that way, and I'm going to write some of those up here on the board in just a minute. Okay, so now we're going to do this. Okay, so I've got a home that was listed. Okay, so I was the buyer on this one. Okay, it was listed at 1495. Okay, out in Eagle Mountain. Okay, awesome house, completely unfinished basement. Okay, and it had been on the market 5 days when we went and saw it. So it was new to the market. Okay, again, when does the negotiation start? When I start doing some research on the property, right? That's when in my head the negotiation starts. Okay, so I found out, so I have a buddy who used to live not far from there. I called him, hey, do you know these people? The Morgans, I think was their last name. Do you know the Morgans? Yeah, I know the Morgans. Sweet, I just showed their house. He's like, oh, their house is awesome. It is. Yeah, like where are they headed? It's like, oh, they're moving to Idaho. They've had some issues like with his construction company. So he basically just like tells me what's going on. The agent didn't, but the neighbor did. Okay, so I know they've got a clock. They've got to go. Anyway, so they need to go. So 5 days in, we got under contract at 1.3. Okay, so 195 grand off the list price, 5 days after that was listed. Okay, that's not super common, right? Beautiful home, and if you don't know the situation, you would think, oh well, we can't ask for that. We won't get it. Okay, we did, right? But again, part of the way we got this is because I pitched to my clients had a home to sell, but they didn't have to sell it. So like, hey, we're not going to sell it. They're going to close on this, then we'll go about the process of getting their home sold, right? But I'm pitching to the listing agent, hey, we're solid. We're going to go fast. My clients, we did even more. We did like $50,000 in earnest money, right? Because that earnest money, it becomes a part of the purchase. The seller's not getting extra money, right? We've got till our financing and appraisal deadline. I have never let my clients go past the finance and appraisal deadline and cancel, except for when they chose their own lender and their lender effed up. And unfortunately, that's happened a couple times. So that's why you want to vet your buyer's lenders if they don't want to use who you've got. You want to call that lender and grill them, okay? But so we basically sold them on, we are solid as solid can be. More than anything, you need to sell this house. So if you need to sell this house, I will show you that yes, you're getting less of what you want, but we're giving you the main thing you want, which is this is solid, okay? Now on this, my clients were going conventional, okay? So 3% is the max amount of concessions that we could get on this, which is how much? Can you guys do the math real quick? Yeah. So 39,000 should have been the max amount of concessions we could get, okay? So what we did is the basement wasn't finished. They did a few things that were working in our favor. They had the square footage wrong on the listing, like low. They had the square footage lower than it actually was. And walking through it and looking at the listing details, I was like, there's no way this is this small. This has way more square footage than this. So I paid my appraiser $50 to go out to their house and do a quick measurement, and they were off by like 800 square feet. Okay? So what I did is I pulled comps to get the price here, by the way. I pulled comps that were similar to the square footage they were listed at, not what it actually was. And I sent to the listing agent, like, hey, dude, we're not getting here on an appraisal. We'll be lucky to get here. Okay, so that's how we got the price down to here. It was his fault, right? He had the wrong square footage. Okay, but then also we decided pretty quickly after we went under contract that, and my buyers were fine buying it at this price as long as they could get some concessions. What do they think about me already? Right? Cody saved us 200 grand, right? But also we negotiated that the seller was going to pay to finish the basement. Completely unfinished basement, 3,200 square foot basement. Okay, do you guys know what the average dollars per square foot it is to finish a basement right now? No, not quite that high. So the average is 60. You can spend way more, you can spend a little less. Builders will usually charge you like in the range of like 55, 60 per square foot to finish it. It can be way more, right? So if we go low end and say $50, 3,200 square feet, right? We're like 150 grand over. Okay, so luckily I have a good contractor who's much cheaper and still was able to give them the finishes they wanted, but the seller ended up paying an additional like $89,000 to finish the basement. And that's going to my contractor. So guess what? I'm getting another person invested in me because I'm sending him awesome amounts of business, right? So when he has referrals, he's like, holy crap. Not only did Cody send me work, he made the sellers pay for my work. So when he has a friend, a family member, who's he gonna want to send him to, right? So they ended up paying an additional like $89,000, I think is what it was. Something like that, 85, 89, to finish the basement. And we're capped at $39,000. So the listing agent says to me, we can't do that. Because what happens is either we're capped at this, or if you say, well, there's $89,000 in work that needs to be done, most lenders will come back and say, okay, if there's $89,000 in work that has to be done, and that's the bid that you've got, what if the work goes over the bid and can't pay for all the work to be done? Right? What if it ends up costing more? Because it does sometimes. So the lender will generally say, you have to put 150%, Mr. Seller, of this amount. So not only is that's 135 grand instead of 89 already. Then the seller has to put it title and held at closing, and they can get a refund of whatever the difference is, right? There's just all these loopholes or all these like obstacles run into and stuff. So I just was a little bit more creative and proactive. So I called the lender. I'm like, hey, is this backwards? What the crap? It's weird. I called the lender. I'm like, hey, Tori, how do I have to word this to make it work? She's like, well, you're gonna have to have 150%. Okay, is there a way for me to make it sound like the work was already done so they don't require that extra 50%? And she's like, I don't know. Like, what if I write it this way? How does that sound to you? And she's like, sounds like the work is done. Like, but I'm not saying it's done. She's like, yeah. So that's the way we did it. And I've done that a bunch of times since. And every time I do it, the listing agent tells me, well, you won't be able to do that. Just don't worry about it. It'll be fine. You agree to it and we'll get it to go. And so it did, okay? But being creative about how you can use this, because most agents would be like, oh, I'm capped at this. And they would have lost out on 50 grand. Because we got the seller to be willing to do it, but the seller can't do it according to the terms of like what most lenders will say you can and can't do. Okay, so now the difference, so let's talk through this a little bit. So there's a $50,000 difference. In a normal transaction, an agent would be like, okay, let's just do this amount then. And the additional 50 will take off the price. Okay, do you know roughly what every $10,000 of price costs in a monthly payment?
Or, sorry, $62 a month.
It ranges between like 62 and 75 depending on the rate. So right, so let's round like 70 bucks. Okay, 70 bucks at $50. Okay, they're saving 350 bucks a month. But now they have to spend 50 grand out of pocket to do the basement. Which would most people rather have? The basement paid for or to save 350 bucks a month on their payment? The basement paid for, that's all immediately out of their pocket, right? That hurts. So being creative about finding ways to make this work will make you super valuable to your clients. And finding a lender who will engage in these conversations with you and help you figure these things out and be in your corner instead of being the like barrier, right? And being an obstacle for you. A lot of lenders are a hurdle rather than being a partner. Okay, and you want a lender, a loan officer who will be a partner, right? So my loan officer will go to bat. He'll argue things with me with the underwriting team, all that kind of stuff, with their processors. And that you want someone that will do that, okay? Because they will be a huge asset to you, right? So this is where most people think that this can't happen, right? Oh, well, I want the basement finished, right? Let's make the seller pay for it. Right? Well, they can't do that. Let's figure out a way to make it happen, right? So being creative, but also just, I guess, not being scared to ask for what you want and what your client wants, but then also being able to talk through with your client what is actually the best solution, right? Because what do a lot of buyers think the best outcome is? It's to get what down? The price, okay? But if the options are I get the price down $20,000, what does that save their payment? About 140 bucks, okay? So I can take that 20 grand and have it held to redo your kitchen. Would you rather have a $140 less payment or basically finance the remodeling of your kitchen? Right? What's more valuable, $20,000 out of my pocket now or 140 bucks a month? right? And that $140 a month, that can go down if rates go down and you refi down the road. So that amount can go down. This 20 grand right out of my pocket, that can't go down, right? That's what this is gonna be. So being able to talk to your clients, what is actually the best way to use this? What's the best way to negotiate something that helps you? If the seller's net number that they'll accept is this, and we've got this gap, what's the best way to use that gap? Okay. Does anybody have any questions? You look like you do. So you look like you have a question. Okay.
Because I'm just trying to understand how you had the seller pay all that money when the price shot down. Is that?
So this one, like I said, the way we got the price down was using their square footage against them, which was wrong, right? And then beyond that, I was like, hey, I was looking back through a bunch of these comps I sent you, a bunch of finished basements. Your basement's unfinished. Yes, your lot is larger. Yes, it has a great view, but like an appraiser isn't gonna compensate a ton for that. So I did this all right after we went under contract pretty much, because the appraiser hadn't gone yet and I could use like the fear of it appraising low. And I was like,
I feel like since they're accepting the lowest offers, they'd be like, why would we pay for that basement?
because we're giving them what they want, which is we're getting them out of Dodge fast. So it comes out of the proceeds of the sale. Yeah. So like we're getting the loan proceeds of 1.3 million are going to them. And before that gets dispersed to the seller, they hold this $89,000 at title. And again, this is where it's important that you find a title company that loves you and will work with you too, because most title companies have really tight parameters on how you can do that. Like, okay, every penny of this money has to be paid to a licensed contractor. We need to have invoices for all of it. We can only hold it for 3 months. A 3,200 square foot basement, probably not gonna be done in 3 months, right? Especially through the winter. So they have time limits on like, okay, it all has to be done within this amount of time. My title company just lets me do whatever the crap I tell them we need to do.
And they only got like 1.2 something.
Yeah,
But they just wanted to go.
they had to go.
Yeah.
Did you know how long it had been on market?
5 days. So, again, but this is where, like, just use everything at your disposal, right? Now, had I not known someone that lived in that neighborhood, kinda, I wouldn't have been able to get some of this info, probably. The listing agent was pleasant, was good to work with, but like didn't like share a lot. But also, I looked at the MLS history. I knew what they had bought the home for a few years earlier. I knew that, okay, they're sitting on a mountain of equity. Yes, they need that money, but it's not like they're not losing money. Does that make sense? I mean, they are when we negotiate the price down, but that's like unrealized, right? If they had paid more when they bought it, it's different. They had bought it for like 750 or something like that when it was built. Yeah, they still made a buttload of money, right? Like still, it's a lot, but so there's a lot of things. So last year in 2024, my buyers saved an average of 9.6% of list price in terms of price reduction and concession. So when I tell my clients, like, look, I'm getting the price down between concessions and price, almost 10% on average. Some were way over that. Some are not, right? This one, we're down $294,000. No, more than that. No, about that. $284,000, 284, down $284,000, right? That's a lot more than 10%.
So when you negotiate the loan, that money to push their basement,
Title holds the money.
but they still get credit check.
Yeah, so what happens is, like, if you're getting the loan, right? So so on this one, like, it's 1.3 million is what they're buying it for, sales price, right? So the seller gets that 1.3 million, and then it's divvied up from there, right? Portion is paid to buyer agent, listing agent, portion goes to title. You know, the lender gets like a fee, and then, or sorry, not the lender. The lender gets their payoff, their mortgage payoff, and then the remainder goes to the seller. before it goes to the seller, that additional $89,000 is held at that title company that we're closing with. So they don't like pay it out of pocket. It's just removed before they get their funds. Yep.
Like paying the appraiser.
Yep. Same with like any credits and all that kind of stuff. It's just a line item on their settlement statement. Okay, so I will tell you, this is how you need to kind of like approach your own clients. Okay, is you need to talk with your clients about the options here. Okay, here's what we want. Here's what we're going to ask for. Here's what the outcomes could be. They could say no, right? They could counter us here, right? So you want to have your clients prepared to not get the things they're asking for. And if I'm a buyer and there's $6,000 in repairs that I want done, I'm going to work backwards. How do I get to that? So I'm going to tell my client, hey, I'm going to go, I have contractors who write bids for me at the highest amount this could possibly be. If I went with the highest end finish, and I tell them, I use the phrase Beverly Hills quote. I'll call my electrician, and I'll be like, Mickey, I need a Beverly Hills quote, dude. And so he will write that quote as expensive as this thing could reasonably be. If I went with the highest end finish on everything and encountered every problem I could possibly encounter when I start doing this work, what could this cost? That's the number I'm using to negotiate. Because I also know realistically it's not going to cost me that much. So I use that high number to negotiate because the seller gets their win by negotiating the price down, but really paying for everything still is what my goal is, right? And I tell my clients this, look, I'm going to get you whatever we can get. Here's what we're going to present. Here's what we're hoping to land at. Maybe we can get even more than that. They may say no to all of it. They may come even lower. So I'm negotiating right now on a listing. The buyer's trying to ask for us to put gutters on, right? We had some other interest. There's never been gutters on this house, even when my clients bought it, way before they bought it. It's a 106-year-old home, right? There's never been gutters on this house. We're not going to pay to put gutters on. But I've told my sellers, they may say, this is non-negotiable. We're not moving forward unless you put gutters on this house, right? So I prepared my clients for the possibility that that is what they say. So part of the prepare is with your own clients, talking them through, here's what we're trying to get. Here's what I will do to try to get there. But here are the possible outcomes. Be ready for any one of them. And don't allow your clients to have emotional responses to these things. Okay? You've got to be really good at being a therapist. There are times I've been in like near divorces in the design center as husband and wife are like screaming at each other over finishes in their house, right? You've got to play therapist quite often. And part of that is you're trying to help the husband, the wife, the two parties, whatever it may be, like understand each other and what's important to each other. But also it's important that you're helping your clients stay unemotional about whatever response we get. So if you're on the listing side and you get an offer that's low, there are some sellers that are like, oh, just offensively low. It's not offensively low, it's just low. They're trying to do what we're trying to do, which is give as little as they have to. Let me figure out where they're at and see what kind of leverage we have to get them up. Don't get emotional about it. If they're not willing to come up, then we're not willing to come up. Let's go. Let's be done with them. If it's a number we won't accept, then that's great. Let's don't accept it. But don't ignore them just because their offer was low. We might be able to get them up. Maybe that's just their first offer, right? Okay. So part of this is preparing your clients for the emotion that's going to come with people saying no to what we ask for. Or when you're on the listing side, people giving way less than we feel like is acceptable. Right? So that's part of being a good agent is being able to navigate your own clients through this. It doesn't mean that you're trying to talk them into accepting something they shouldn't accept. You're not trying to talk them into accepting anything, buyer or seller. Your job is not to convince them of accepting something. Your job is to provide context. Okay? Hey, here's their offer. We don't have to accept it. You don't have to feel good about it. I want you to know that in the realm of what is currently going on in the market, because I am in the market, I'm making offers and having transactions close. This is not crazy low. That doesn't mean that we have to like it or accept it. Don't get offended because this is not like outside the realm of what is happening. That doesn't mean it's going to happen here, but these people may feel like this is a totally reasonable thing to do. Right? So you want to coach your clients through that and provide context to help them decide how they feel about it. Don't allow them to get emotional. Okay? When it comes to with an agent, like actually doing the negotiation, that's where you like work through, okay, here's what I want. I'm going to prepare for this phone call because when I say this, here's probably how they will respond. Try to like map out the navigation of that conversation. Right? Okay? Then you call, you present it, you figure out how you're going to do that. I find that it's always helpful to ask for more than you're actually happy to get. Right? So offer less than you're happy to pay, that kind of stuff. But there are some things that I never ask my clients, and you'll do well to do the same. And even tell your clients you're not going to ask them, because again, this will help build trust with your clients. Okay? When you have a seller, say, I'm never going to ask you what is the lowest you would go. Because I don't ever want you to be worried that I'm relaying that info to someone on the other side of a transaction. I would never do that, but I'm not even going to ask that because I don't want you to even consider that that's happening. On the buy side, I'm never going to ask you to pay for this house. I'm going to tell you, hey, I think we could probably come in about here, keep them on the line and get a negotiation going, but where do you want to start our offer? And these are things I tell my clients. I'm not going to ask you this. The reason I'm not going to ask you is because I want you to know 100% that this is information that's never getting to the agent on the other side. And the reason I do that is because agents on the other side tell me these things. They tell me how low their clients will go sometimes, which is ridiculous, crazy, but it happens more than it should. Okay? So you want to go ahead and present that. And then again, like the move both parties closer, that's where now we're trying to iron out. If you submit an offer to me, I'm not just going to have my clients draft send a counter offer back. I'm going to call you and say, hey, there are some items in your offer my seller's not prepared to accept. These are those things. We're working through where they want to be and where they want to counter you. Just want you to be aware that these are the items that don't work for them. You'll have agents that will tell you sometimes, oh, okay, that's totally fine. I think my buyers would be willing to adjust to this or something like that, which is crazy. It happens all the time, right? And this is where you try to like navigate them to where you want to be.
Find it, rather than do 45 counter offers, not 45, but 6 or 7 counter offers back and forth, you usually just call the other agent and say, hey, this is where we're wanting to counter.
Yeah, I don't like to do the whole like send counter offer back and back and back and back. I don't like that. There's some agents that they do that. And I think it's partly because whether it's because they're uncomfortable talking on the phone, they're uncomfortable with like voice to voice or face to face interaction, I don't know. Or maybe they're smart. Maybe they know that if they get on the phone with you, they might say something they shouldn't. I don't know. Right? But there are some that they just hide behind their email. They just do.
I like to just call them. Hey, this is what we're expecting to counter.
So
Is this acceptable? Will this be acceptable, do you think, to your clients? Just so we can, rather than play it back and forth.
see, and I give them context as well. Like, hey, here's where we are. Here's likely they haven't signed it yet. We haven't like put it to paper yet. Here's what they're thinking, and here's why. Right? I want that agent to be able to sell the why to their client. Right? Because if all they get is a counter with no context, I may as well have just sent a blank counter or sent a counter back without talking to them, right? I want to talk them through, here's where my client's head is at. Here's why this says what it says. So I closed a home in Ogden just a little bit ago. It was listed at $370 and they were offering $10,000 in concessions. No, $375. Yeah, $375 and they were offering $10,000 in concessions. So $365 net, right? We offered $370, so $5,000 down on price, and we asked for $15,000 in concessions. Okay, so we were netting them $10,000 below their list, or below their listed net. Their counter offer, she didn't call me, she didn't talk to me, nothing. I got a counter offer at $390 with $10,000 in concessions. So you were netting $365 originally on your listing, and now you're wanting to net $380. And I was like, Heidi, help me understand this. Well, you know, we're just supposed to do whatever our client wants. And I just straight up told her, I was like, no, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to coach them and help them get to like a resolution, not just, well, here's what they offered. What do you want to do? That's not your job. Right? That's like being an attorney and saying, well, what do you want to do? No, that's not how this works. They don't know what they can do. They don't know what's normal, right? Your job is to guide them and coach them through this. And guess what we end up closing at? Our original offer. Because like basically at that point, like she told me some things, but I just learned she was unwilling to relay anything to her client other than what was exactly on paper. And what do you want to do? That's what she was going to do with her clients. So you know what I did? I couldn't figure out if she was just forwarding everything, but in the hopes that she was, with our counter offer back, I just drafted this long freaking email that addressed every bullet point that we had in there. And I'm assuming she forwarded it because then they accepted it. Right? But again, they had no context because she wouldn't relay anything. So this doesn't always work. Right? And I'm not going to pretend like the way that I want to do things always works. It doesn't. But it works better than the alternative, which is what this lady was doing. Right? Go ahead.
So Cody's is pivot if you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Be prepared, right? Prepare to adjust. Right? And again, this is part of being a chameleon, right? Adapting to who you're working with on the other side in a way that helps your client. There are agents who all they want is you to feel like they won, like they got the better of you, like they're the more experienced one and they're in charge. Great. I will let an agent on the other side feel like they're getting everything they want and like they are owning me. I don't care. Ego aside, if it gets my client what they want, I will be deferential to you because I know we're getting what we want, even though you think you're getting what you want. Right? So like that's part of this, right? Like be adaptable. Okay, we're just gonna go through this and then we're gonna wrap up. So before you go through and make these phone calls and stuff, right? Know your goal. More importantly, know your client. What do they need and what do they want? Right? What is more important to them? Because there are times that they're going to get blinded and distracted by parts of a transaction and by terms in an offer and that kind of stuff. And they're going to forget things that were important to them. Right? And it's your job to look out for them so you can say, okay, let's pause real quick. You told me that this is something that we wanted. We're getting away from that. Is that what we want to do? If the answer is yes, I'm good. I want to make sure that you don't forget and lose sight of this thing that you told me was important. You told me we need to be within 20 minutes of this charter school you want your kids to go to. This isn't within 20 minutes. It's at the price we want, it's the size we want. Does that outweigh the distance? That's okay if the answer is yes. I want you to at least think about it before we make a decision that ends up being one that you just didn't think about. Okay, so that's where it's important that you know your client, you've gotten to know them ahead of time. And again, be really personable. The reason I asked earlier when you said you'd done some retail, and I asked if we'd talked about the bank thing. In retail, I used to manage 30 plus Verizon retail stores. Okay, so I was in retail for a long time. The way that most retail employees communicate with and interact with somebody that walks in is so uncomfortable and cringy to me. They're like trying to be so professional. How can we help you today? Like it's so awkward. I hate it. So same way that most like servers are in restaurants, they're so uncomfortable. It's like they've never talked to a human being and someone's making them do it for the first time. You want to try with your own client, just be as normal and real as possible. Talk to them the way that you talk to your family. Talk to them the way that you talk to your friends. Now, obviously, if you use, vulgar language, clean it up. But the tone of your voice, right? The sincerity in the things that you say, get away from this, right? It's awkward. People don't connect with you when you interact like that. Okay? And it's something that naturally we're like, oh, well, I'm trying to be professional. Have you ever gone into an open house? Like a listing, new listing open house? Okay, usually open houses are run by agents that aren't the listing agent. I hate it. That's why I don't like it to be done, because I know the experience because I've gone in them with my clients. And they're like, hey guys, welcome. What are you looking for today? Do you have an agent? I'm like, oh my gosh. So guess what I don't do in my open houses? I don't do that. Like, hey guys, come on in, have a look around. Will you please put the shoe covers on? It's wet outside. Put the shoes covers on. Let me know if you have any questions, just a little bit of info about the house before you get started. The roof was replaced at this, water heater, blah, blah, blah. Neighborhood's awesome. Feel free to wander. Let me know if you have questions. And I leave them alone. And then after a little bit, I'll sort of like navigate over to him and be like, hey, so what have you been looking for? Is this what you've been looking for? Or is this kind of like a veer off the road of what you've been looking at, right? I'll start a conversation with them that way. But again, when it comes to knowing your client, you can't get to know your client if you don't get real to a point where they can also get real. Okay? Think ahead. This is where I was talking about think through the conversation. If I say this, what is likely to be the response? And then with that response, how would I respond? Or if that's not the response I want and need, how do I approach it so I get the response that I need? Okay? Planning that out. Again, setting clear expectations. That's with your client, right? We're going to ask for this. Here could be the response, right? Be informed. Know about the area, the comps, whatever it may be. If they ask you, Cody, how does the listing price look? There are some agents just say, oh yeah, it looks like it's priced well. It may not be priced well. I had an agent that I showed a home. We were going to make an offer, and she said, well, all the feedback I've gotten is that it's appropriately priced. I'm like, well, it's not. It's not. Have you run comps? Yes, I've run comps. Can you show me the ones you're using? Well, it's because the comps that you're using don't support the price that you've got. People are telling you that it's priced well because they want to get you off the phone when you call them for feedback. They're not interested. The price may not be the reason, but they're not interested. They're trying to get you off the phone. So know the area they're looking in, right? Like all that kind of stuff. I want to be close to this. Then know what is around where they're looking, okay? Obey the laws, obviously, right? And then know the docs. We talked about that earlier. Know the documents you're working with, okay? So for example, this is a great one. There was a home that we made an offer on that was overpriced. My clients were using an FHA loan, which means you have to use the FHA addendum. Okay, there's an FHA VA loan addendum that you have to use. In there, it states that nothing can make the buyer's earnest money non-refundable if the appraisal does not match or exceed the sales price. So if the appraisal comes in low, doesn't matter where you are in the transaction, day before closing, the earnest money is fully refundable to the buyer if the appraisal was lower than the purchase price. Okay? Do you know how many agents don't frickin' know that that's in there? So we made an offer, waived appraisal contingency to win. The appraisal came in low, as I knew it would, but we were like a week from closing and the seller had to go. They already like had their new home lined up. So they were like, well, you waived your appraisal. Yeah, but it was FHA, which you knew, which meant there had to be an appraisal. And now we're lower, so you need to lower the price or else, well, the earnest money is non-refundable. No, it's not. It says right here that it's not. Okay, so we got the price adjusted. So again, know the documents that you're dealing with. If you don't know everything that's in there, you should never be sending it to a client to sign. But then also familiarize yourself with other forms. Just read through them, figure out what they're for. There was one where we lost out, this is in 2020, we made an offer on this home, we got a bunch of offers, we lost out to a cash sale from a flipper because they weren't worried about the appraisal price, right? It was gonna go fast and need some repairs. So they went with the cash offer. I called the listing agent, was like, hey, who is the buyer's agent on that one? He's like, why? I'm like, we're gonna offer to buy it from them. He's like, okay. I'm like, yeah, like, don't worry, just like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But so he sent me their number, I called her, and it was, like I said, it was a flipper. Like, hey, how much are you expecting to net on this? She told me, like, okay, what if we can net you that like the day that you close? You don't have to do the work, you don't have to do the time, like put all the time and effort in. She's like, okay, but how do we do that? And there's an addendum called a simultaneous close, where we can be under contract with the buyer who's under contract with the seller. So the day they close, we close with them immediately. So they never even took possession of the home. We bought it from them the moment that they closed. Crazy, right? But again, there's all these forms in there that are for different scenarios that unless you do some research and find them, you'll never know. Okay. I think that's all we're going to go through today. Do you guys have any questions about any of this? This is the fun part, by the way. This is the stuff that sets you apart because I think I told you guys last time, you shouldn't be scared of any of your potential clients interviewing other agents. Don't be scared of it. Embrace it, okay? Because a smart buyer or seller should be interviewing agents. Okay, so know who you're up against and know how to win. The things that I say is like, hey, interview other agents, go for it. Beyond what you're paying them, you want to know who you're hiring. Ask them, how do they go about getting you what you want? That's an easy question to have them ask. Ask them how they go about getting you what you want and see what they say. Most agents don't have something off the top of their head that they can like go right to. I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. They don't know. So you have that locked and loaded. These are the things that I do. I do my own open houses for a reason. I'm trying to sell your house. I'm not going to let another agent do it. We're going to do an open house. And I've had some sellers say like, well, I've heard that open houses aren't worth it. Last year I sold 5 listings that the buyer came through the open house. Now, some of them also had agents, but even if they have an agent, why do I want them to come through the open house? Why is that better for me as a listing agent if they came through the open house?
Like you stated earlier, they see everyone else that's going through.
And I limit my open houses. I don't do multiple, and I don't do them for like 4 hours. 2-hour open house, I want them to see other people in there. Because even if that person is not an actual buyer, to them, there's now this feeling of there may be some competition for this one. So even if they're not like, it's not like a crazy awesome offer, it will be better than it would have been. Right? So you have these things locked. I do my own open houses. I don't allow showings until the open house because I want there to be multiple people there at the same time. I allow overlapping showings on my listings. I allow overlapping showings because when they show up to show it and there's already an agent there, same thing. Oh crap. There may be some competition for this one. Right? Also, any buyer that shows my home, I go through and I see who I'm working with, and then I call every single one of them to discuss the home, feedback, whatever it may be, because they may have a concern, the buyer may have a concern that they voiced their buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent won't call you to ask about it. So if you call them, they may ask you that question, and you can, alleviate their concerns for whatever that may be. Right? You want to have outlined, here are the things I do that help put you in a better spot to get you more of what you want. Because most agents haven't thought through those exact things. They may have a presentation, but if they got caught off guard with, hey, what do you do? Oh, well, let me show you no, without a presentation, if you don't know off the top of your head, it's because you're not doing it. So we just talked through the 3 Ps, right? These 3 Ps, okay? When it comes to listing, most, and I mean most agents follow the 3 Ps. Not these 3 Ps. They put a sign in the yard, they post it online, and they pray to God it sells. That's like it. They just hope. Well, I did what I can do. It's online. There's a sign. I have a neighbor that's an agent. He doesn't even put in signs. Last year, I sold 2 homes to unrepresented buyers, and there's another one that I ended up representing them on a purchase of a different home as an unrepresented buyer. 3 transactions I got just because there were signs in the yard. People that were just calling off of the sign. And those are buyers that my clients would have missed out on too, right? So again, like these are the things you want to have a strategy for what you do, why you do it, and be able to explain that clearly to a potential client. Okay, so real quick before we wrap up, what did this do? Oh, I turned it off. That's okay. Takeaways. What's like your biggest, this is something I'm going to incorporate or adjust?
After the showing of a home, calling the listing agent and going through the questions, just say, hey, this is one of the properties that I'm considering, and then kind of ask, what does your seller need from us? Kind of same questions that you said.
Well, don't ever tell them my client loves it. Don't ever say that. They might, but don't ever say it. Dallin.
Mine was kind of the same. I never would have thought to call the agent before making an offer.
and like just researching neighbors like that and what about that. So that was definitely something that would definitely